To order. First would be the confirmation of the agenda. Is there any additions or deletions? Thank you, Morris. Call for the question on the agenda. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the minutes of April 8th Ag Service Board meeting. Klaus?
I'll move the minutes of the April 8th.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. If nothing, I'll call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. And Gary, your report for Supervisor of Ag Services report.
Yes, we'll get right into that. First, we'd like to welcome Alan Efetha. So, Alan, maybe you could explain your new role. We used to have the key contact when folks from the Alberta government would come to our meetings. There's a new role. I think it's called the Regional Liaison member, if that's right. So Alan will be here to observe our meetings like we have in the past, and then if there's any questions as we go through, if we could just save them for the end for Alan, and maybe he can add some clarity from the provincial government. So welcome, Alan.
Okay, welcome and good morning, Alan.
All right, getting into my report, we'll just go through as usual, and if there's any questions, just stop and we can have a discussion on whatever you want to. So. The Ag Service Board grant, very surprised. We got our payment in June this year. Our new amount is $123,000 for the legislative stream resource management, $91,000, and we also got a payment from last year for the $91,000. So moving forward, we got our set amounts. Mowing, the first cut of mowing is complete, and we're well into the second round. It's been a fairly easy year on mowing. Just the second round is we're mowing a lot of kochia weed and cleaning up that as part of our vegetation management program. Normally we'll send out a disc mower into West Barrens and some of the dryland country. We did not do that this year just because of the fire risk with that type of mower. So everything is being done with triple gangs, which takes a little longer. And that disc mower, it helped save on costs. So mowing's going quite good, and it's looking good on the second pass. Not a lot of regrowth, as you could imagine. Hamlets and subdivisions, same thing. Going through one second pass, fairly easy, a light amount, and they look quite good with that little bit of rain we had. Mowing also being done for weed control in areas where we can't spray. A little less of that this year. Normally we go to where there's been road construction and shoulder pulls, so a little less of that work creates a little less work for us with all the weeds that come in with the seeded grass as well. So weed control, most of the roadside spraying done in divisions 4, 5, and 6 this year, and that was our spray zone area. We have not done as much spraying. What I'm trying to say is we've done a lot of spraying this year because of the kochia that comes up on the edge of the road. We have more miles than a long time, and we're using mainly contact herbicides just because some of the ones that have the residual will stick around too long in a drought, and we don't want to have that risk of moving off target. So custom spray work, we completed that in July. We caught that after we had a little bit of rain, so we did use some residual herbicides there and sending out the bill here right away, and it's right around the 28,000. That is our normal amount. They haven't cut that funding. Where they have seen the cut is the mowing, so they're only doing one cut in most areas. They have double cut between Colville and Lethbridge. We've asked them to cut the jail road just because it's difficult for us to spray. We're noticing the weeds are coming on the highways. I mean, if you're driving up and down the road, you can see that, right? So with them, we run the program for them just like we do our own program. We set we're roads that we want to spray each year, kind of move around so there's control in all areas. And then we work with them on doing a little bit of additional spraying sometimes or mowing. So weed inspections, it's been ongoing, and there's been a number of weed notices this year. I think there's been 4. Road top vegetation control trucks. So what we're doing here is we're controlling weeds on top of the road. And that is the main area we have weeds in, and this has been our most successful program. We're using a herbicide that's pre-emergent, so we're able to get it down in May, and we spray it with Roundup or something that's contact as well, and it's working incredibly well. We're going to increase the amount of roads. We increased the amount this year, and we hope to use it on some of our road out in the ditch a little bit further just to get some more control. Mainly we're dealing with kosher on top of the road, so the grader guys like it. They don't have to get to the edge of the road and deal with the excess vegetation as much. And as soon as we're done mowing, they're in there doing their shoulder work. So, biocontrol. So we had some biocontrol releases. The only agent they're releasing right now is for leafy spurge. I think COVID kind of hurt their planning a little bit. So monitoring those, Alberta Invasive Plants Council are the ones that give us the release, and they come out, and there's a couple ladies this year, and they were monitoring past performance. The leafy spurge agents are working incredibly well this year, and I think the reason is the dry. They must do well in the dry conditions. The amount of beetles found is incredible. So. And also in the past, we put knapweed agents as well, mainly along the river system, and they're working well as well. I'll give you a case point here. One of our weed inspectors was traveling through Nobleford, and they found a knapweed plant, which is very unusual to find one there. One knapweed plant he found, and it was covered in biocontrol agents. Our closest biocontrol agent release site was in the Colhurst area, so they're moving on their own. And we're going to continue with that program, and we're spreading along and covering the whole county. Residents really like it because there's not a lot you can do with leafy spurge. It's difficult to control with spray, and lots of people don't want to use herbicide along the river system, and they shouldn't be probably either. So, moving on to pest control, grasshoppers. You've all seen the news reports from Lethbridge. There are definitely some hot spots in the county, but surprisingly, there's also places where you're not finding a lot of grasshoppers. West Lethbridge, I think things have settled down there. And there's the grasshoppers, I believe, what I'm hearing, got disease, and once the crops are off as well. So another hot spot was Sundahl area. I went out into a field, and it's incredible when you haven't seen grasshopper problem for 20, 25 years. They're eating the heads right off, eating the grain. It's interesting to see that again, and we don't hope that does not continue that. But I mean, if the drought stays with us, we're going to continue to see grasshopper issues. I talked to a farmer in that turn area, and they sprayed, and they used a couple different herbicides, and the next day they come back, the ground was covered. So they needed to do that. There's some spraying going on. Bacterial ring rot. That's the potato fields. No suspect plants found. We were looking at 9 fields this year. That's an increase. Normally we're in the thought.
So ring rot, what does that show on a potato? Like the potato was just rotten?
Well, we've got staff that's been trained, so you look for some wilting of the plant, and then you take off a cutting and you kind of squeeze it with a pair of pliers, and you'll see pussy material come out. It's difficult to identify, so if we find something that we think is a problem, we'll send it away for lab analysis. And when it gets into the potato, so if you see some plants like that, you dig them up, and then the potato will actually have a black ring in the potato, and then it just, if those are put into storage, they just disintegrate, and they kind of got a pus that comes out of them, and then it can affect seed potatoes, and it's just Not something we want. We've never found it here. It has been found in southern Alberta before, though.
The reason I brought it up, my neighbor, he grows that, well, beautiful, potato rows for his garden. And the bulk of his potatoes are rotten. They dig them up the hill and whatever, and they're completely rotten. So anyways, and he also visits my daughter Daddy once in a while, and my daughter Daddy, he would know to come down, so we know for sure what you found.
Yeah, and if you give him a number, we can come take a look at that if he wishes to. And, yep, yep. I mean, we're not complete experts, but we can find the ones that are and send it along to them. We work with the Potato Growers Association. Yeah, that won't be a problem. Both the armyworm, that's carried out again this year. That's on canola, and I have a misprint in here. I put numbers are rising slightly. Numbers actually drop slightly with the Bertha armyworm, so we'll have to get that corrected. We were told after our traps come down in July that there will be no issue with Bertha armyworm, so there's not numbers are small. Strychnine, we sold 1,394 bottles of strychnine this year. That's down. We ran out of product in mid-June. We had about enough for the year, and the reason a less amount here, I think guys have bought extra probably last year and are still holding on to some. So we won't have that to be used as a product again. And they have until next year to go through it and use it up, or else they'll have to turn it in. And I think most farmers, they're going to be able to use that up. So options for that, we'll have to look at. I mean, there's nothing great. As part of the Farmer Pesticide Certificate Program, there's an endorsement you can get for Festoxin. So you can use Festoxin on gophers. I can teach that program, and if they have the Farmer Pesticide Certificate already, they can study, and then they can come and write a test at my office, and they can use that for gopher control. There's people in the county that do that, and they like it. It works good. So that's the only great option. I mean, there's other ones that don't work quite as good. So, a private trapper we hired for skunk and rabies detection, and the focus here this year was a little bit different area. We believe the rabies issue, if there ever one, will come from the east or the south, and that's kind of where we focus this year. Broxburn Road, right along the Old Man River. The reason we picked this area, we got a call for a rat issue perhaps in a combine that was brought in from Saskatchewan. In checking out the area, we found an incredible amount of skunks, so we thought they might have some success there, and I think they did. And regarding that rat infestation, we visited that site at first daily and then weekly when we realized there probably wasn't a problem, and we put out poison to control anything that was there. There was a lot of mice that come in and that, and we're not sure what it was, but we're very confident it was not a rat infestation. So, moving on, a private contractor was hired by the Society to Prevent Dutch Elm Disease to do a survey for Dutch elm in Diamond City. So, the contractor come out of Saskatchewan, and we learned an incredible amount about Dutch elm from these guys. They taught us in a course in Tabor. We went over there, and they had a group of people that taught us on Dutch elm. It's incredible what they do. In Saskatchewan right now, they're finding Dutch elm everywhere, and we don't want it here. The big concern is firewood. Firewood is expensive right now, and if you're coming back from Saskatchewan, you can't bring it with you. But the biggest thing I learned is that if you have elm trees and you think there's a problem, and you had a problem last year, it wasn't Dutch elm, because that tree would be dead. In 1 year, the tree's gone. So we do get calls every once in a while. We put out information on Dutch elm that you should not prune during the pruning ban, and then my phone rings to come look at the sick elm trees. So we haven't found anything. They've also taught us how to survey. So we take a snippet off the tree, and we're able to send that way for analysis. And nothing's come back. These folks, they have an eye for it. They go through the community and just look at all the trees. They also took a look at the Barrens area. There was another survey that I got back here just recently. No Dutch elm was found. And of course, the reason we're looking so close in these areas is because Dutch elm disease was found in the city of Lethbridge. So, and they go through their phone records and all the records of incidents where people have phoned and thought they had Dutch elm. That's the areas they're going to take a look, and also where firewood has been stored.
Thank you, Chair. So Gary, does that elm only affect elm trees, or can it affect other types of trees?
No, yeah, from my understanding, just elm trees, but all types of elm trees. I mean, the normal elms we see here are American elm. Those are the nice big ones. There's also a Siberian elm. They're a little bit different. They don't look like your typical elm tree. And then there's other hybrids that are in the county as well. We purchase Brandon elms that we put in our parks. They're still a really good tree. We just have to be vigilant on keeping the Dutch elm out. Moving on to soil erosion. This has been the year of soil erosion. Large-scale wind events created a real issue last winter. We have reminded producers of their obligations under the Soil Conservation Act through social media, the Sunny South News, and public service announcements. That is working very well. A group of municipalities in the south, we teamed up and we contracted Farming Smarter to do some work on soil erosion. So they have put out 2 articles for us. You may have seen they're quoting our municipalities, our policies on what we do. Soil erosion is everybody's responsibility, and we're making a lot of phone calls and educating the younger producers and everyone else that needs information. Like, we can get them information, and I mean, it's very difficult to watch your land blow, and especially if you don't have an answer. Some of the land that was blowing was on frozen ground. A lot of people tried putting manure on that. It works somewhat, but I mean, that is not a situation that anybody wants. If they phone us, we do have solutions. We have a machine that can make some ridges, and also we could work with our grader operators, and getting into frozen soil sometimes is possible with one ripper on the back of a grader. And we've done it before, and it works. So, and you'll see more of those articles coming out from Farming Smarter here over the next couple weeks. The idea is to get farmers thinking about it before winter and how they leave their soil. It's already happening and already working. You're seeing some of the large feeder operations that have taken off silage or seeding already. There's been growth, and we're hoping by the time end of October there'll be something there to hold the soil. So I think that's what they're hoping as well. So roadside seeding, ASB crews undertake the seeding, and a little bit less work with that because road construction is more, it takes a longer process, so less miles are getting done, of course. And if they ramp up to more shoulder pulls, we'll have more work. And then every time ups and downs of flows of this work, it affects our other work as well. And one thing to remember, we're seeding all of our grass into dryland conditions in a drought. Good luck getting grass going under these conditions. So we usually normally use a hydro seeder. We're putting we're spreading it onto and putting it in with a disc, just scratching lightly. Hydro seeder will dry out on top in these drought conditions where you need something in the soil. So we're doubling down on our efforts. The stuff we seeded this spring, it came up, but not as good as it should have been, that's for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, and we all seen that when you do roadside seeding, you know, like whatever, and when it's a fairly wet summer or whatever, you have a good, you know, population coming up. However, I've seen some dry years, and it seems to maybe not come that the greatest, but the next year there is more and more coming. So that seed will sit dormant down there and then germinate maybe the next year.
Oh, absolutely. So we did some seeding last fall, and with the dry winter, with the hydro seeder, and nothing came up. And then when that rain hit here a month and a half ago, it germinated. So it'll sit there until it gets some moisture conditions if it doesn't blow away, which, you know, is also a concern. But with the hydro seeder, we're putting down a tackifier that will hold it for a year. So it stays there for a year. And we always tell our guys, make sure you seed good on top because it'll always get to the bottom. So, and just another point, when I first started with the county, it was a drought in the early 90s, and we were told not to look back at what you had seeded for 3 years. It'll come, be patient. So, problem is that you're not really able to spray those areas because you want the grass to establish. So that's where we're sending out those mowers and doing mowing work to keep them so people aren't having weed concerns there. So. Equipment rental, drilling and drill rental, been very steady. I put this report in a while back. Up-to-date numbers are, I think, 33 users with about $5,000 in revenue. These drills are paying for themselves. We have 2. They are very busy in the spring, and we are getting calls every day. We'll put it out on social media or in a newsletter, and phone starts ringing. So we want to keep these. The last set of drills we had were 25 years old, and it was a high maintenance. With these making good value, we may be looking at replacing it earlier just so people have a reliable piece of equipment. Plastic baler use, that has increased a lot over the last years, and that's just with some of the programs that are being run by Clean Farms, and we're lucky to have DBS Environmental that's working with us at the transfer stations too. They will use our bag roller to re-roll bags. They're doing what it takes, and I won't go into this too much because Clean Farms is here today to do a presentation on that. Skunk, raccoon, and magpie trap usage, same thing. We put this out on social media, and the next thing you know, all of our traps are out. Constantly people phoning for magpie traps. Skunk traps a little bit less, but they're always in demand. So we'll have to make a few more this winter. Parks, playground, yard maintenance, and all the mowing we do with the parks crew. Obviously, in our dryland parks there in July, there wasn't a lot to mow. Same thing, weeds would come back. We kept them as nice as we could. The rain greened things up, but much less effort was needed this year. So we've taken that effort and we're planting trees. We put a lot of trees in our parks in the last 5 years. Lots of feedback from citizens that they enjoy the trees that we're planting, and we're to keep those trees alive, it's taken a lot of effort with watering. We also were able to put in some parks amenities. We're putting in picnic tables and garbage bins and the odd small play equipment. So we're getting lots of good feedback on that. And then we're also have the grant we have for the Monarch Playground. We're obligated for some money to put there. We've been working with them. It's going a little bit slower than we would have liked. So they have to put in an application to become a nonprofit organization, and it's just taking longer than they would have liked as well. So what they're doing is getting that done so we can apply. They can apply for a provincial grant, which will enhance that park even more. So that right now they're going through trying to get that application in. Cemeteries, we're mowed and weed whipped twice. The second round of doing that was a little bit more weed whipping than around the gravestones than anything else. Those are our driest areas where those graveyards are located.
Gary, has Monarch, did they start a new society or something for the playground? Is that what they need to apply for
They
then?
didn't have one that they could go through. So yeah, so they're creating that right now. And time is not on their favor for next year because you need to get those applications in right away. I would say before December if you want to get a project done next year. So that might push it back another year or till the end of last year. Ideally, when we're dealing with these community associations, we like to put in playgrounds in the spring. And kids are using them, and you see the value. Putting a playground in September is not nearly as ideal, right? So. And then upcoming, we have through the budget allotted the next community that we work will likely be Shaughnessy in 23. So we may have some back-to-back projects, and I'll start working with them this winter.
With, do you work with the community associations?
Yep, we do, and we get them going on. The county has given some money, and we meet with them, and we create relationships with them. We let them, we set them up with our contacts for playground equipment. There's some good ones in the county. We tell them what we would like, and then they can pick what they like. So when they're able to pick all the amenities they like, you know, that was their decision if it doesn't get used. If it doesn't put that on myself, I'm not a child or a parent of a young child, so I don't know what's perfect for them. So they like doing that. Keeping going. Any more questions on playgrounds or anything like that? Okay, we did a $5,000 donation to the Farm Safety Center, as we always do through the ASB budget. I haven't got the numbers back on kids they have reached out to. They were going to an online format and some in person, I believe. That report will come later on. The Farm Family, that's been really a stalled out deal with the Calgary Stampede not going in full fashion. So the Slomp Family, they hold that nomination until it is presented. We had planned a farmer pesticide course, and we had worked it out with Bill Hammond, as we always do. We work in coordination with him. We promoted, nobody signed up, whether they didn't want to do the online or whatever. We had one person from the county and one other person, so we didn't have it. And we reached out, to that person that they can come and they can do it correspondence-wise and then come right to test at my office as well. So we've done a number of these courses over the last 5 years. Maybe we've caught up a little bit. We'll continue to try to have them, but if there's maybe we're caught up and it'll be cycled through in another 5 years. So up next, resource management stream. So this stream of funding, the work here was done by a young individual we have at the county, Matthew Wells, and he's done a great job of digging into this, and he's inspired to do some good work. So I'll go through what he has provided me, and this report was put in a while ago as well, so there's some updates I'll touch on as well. The county newsletter, so we rebranded the newsletter, and we called it Rural Living and Ag Extension, and that one come out in March, the first one. We're working on another one. We work kind of with a committee, myself, Matthew, Derek Vance, and the communications department on putting this out. The idea here, it went from solely nutrient management. We put other things in there to grab people that would want to read it, and then put in all the other stuff that we are required to, the CAP funding and environmental farm plans. And so we have a mix. The feedback we've got, it was very well received in the community. So the next one's going to be similar, and we're excited to see reaching out to more people in the community. So Matt's meeting a lot of people, and that's great for putting out ag information. Floating islands, and this is something that just come to us. Some folks in the county donated some of these floating islands, and the idea here is it cleans up the stormwater, wastewater. So we've got 4 that were donated. We purchased the plants, and they're in Broxburn if you ever buy there. The plants are doing good. Studies are showing that these do work. We're going to be putting a bunch more of these in the fall here to give it a chance, and we're going to showcase to producers and people in the county that this may be an option to chemical control. This was put out on social media as a post, and it is the largest post the county's had on people who viewed it. It was between 100 and 200 people viewed the post.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you use
Yeah, I would think you could. It's to like, kind of control the algae. I'm not an expert, but this is just a kind of a new concept. There are a ton of these in the city of Lethbridge that I went and visited and looked at, and it works in conjunction. You know, at Broxburn we got the big bubblers, and that takes a lot of energy to run those to clean the water, and then you're using chemicals in the past like bluestone that are not necessarily good for the environment. So the idea is to clean these up. And also it would work in a pond like that. Like I say, a study is being done right now at Olds College for these. They just announced it here in the summer. So we tested the water prior to, and so we have a baseline data for the if it's working or not.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you use in Broxburn there, that's actually a glorified aerator?
The ones that are there right now are aerators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because most people have those aerators in their dugouts and stuff like
Yeah.
that too, and it really helps, you know, to keep the pond clean and keep it clean of algae and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And the deal with these is that it's a larger pond. The Broxburn pond's actually holding a lot of water, and to make these work and give them a fair chance, we're going to need a number of them. So we may have to continue with those, or we may have to get, like the city is what they've got, is they lay out bubblers that are kind of on the bottom of the ponds, and then every so often they'll bubble to circulate the water so that those plants can then grab what's circulating and clean it up.
So how big of a pond would you like?
I can't answer that one. I'd have to get back to you on the perfect size.
Okay.
But Matt has some information on that. And for our area, it's going to take quite a bit. And they're not inexpensive, but we just want to show the options. And the reason so many people on social media liked it is because it's non-chemical.
Yeah, because wouldn't it be a great idea to use it like on the big feedlots? They have pretty big ponds where they have their water, and they use the water, and then you can see if it's really working. That you know that the drinking water for the animals gets a lot better.
Yes, and that's what we're going to promote. So if we have tours in the future, we'll take the tours out there and show them. And Matt, when he's meeting with producers through environmental farm plans, he can mention these sorts of things to them. It's I don't know how new the concept is. I mean, the city's got them in a lot of wastewater ponds in drainage ponds in the city. So. Moving on, informing the public. So Matt has been sending out what is that weed and what is that insect. I think people enjoy finding out about weeds and insects, and we'll continue to do that. We'll only do it during the summer months, and that'll probably be ending right here. As well, we've been putting a lot of information out on social media. If you guys are hooked up to Facebook, and you'll notice there's a lot of ag information going out. We've never promoted agriculture and all the programs for the province as much, and the reason being is you can't meet in person, so that's their way of getting the information out. I think producers are liking it. We don't want to monopolize the county's social media, and sometimes we feel like we are doing that. And CAP funding. That works in conjunction with the environmental farm plan. So Matt has taken the environmental farm plan training. This is a little dated. He's finished, and he's already started going through environmental farm plans with producers. They're lining up, dairy producers mainly. They are required to have an environmental farm plan for their association. And we've got 4 or 5 on the queue right now, and Matt is getting incredibly busy with that. And he's becoming, guiding them to CAP funding. Like CAP funding has been held back, of course, because of the financial situation in the province. But programs that are available, he's becoming knowledgeable in them, and he's leading producers to what they can get.
On the CAP funding, that's do you have any idea how many people are still active? And because I mean they are they're also working with the classrooms, and that's actually the classroom agriculture program. Is that what you're referring to? Isn't that correct?
No, it's a Canadian Agriculture Partnership funding. So it's some money that's available for certain programs in cooperation with the province and the federal government. So there's a website you go to, and there's plans, programs for watering, sometimes off-stream watering, sometimes pumping during dry conditions. And it's a grant that's usually, it takes some input from the producer as well. It's not just here's a whole bunch of money. They've got to put some funding in as well.
I asked them because the province also has a group there, and that's not connected to the government or anything like that, but the classroom agriculture program that they have, and that they go and speak there at the classroom. And I think it's grade 4 that they always use, and that they enlighten them about the agriculture and everything like that. That they especially because the kids are 3, 4, 5 generations removed from agriculture over the years, and that way we use that, because I know in the dairy industry we use that for trying to educate the children. Yeah. So I don't know. That's why I thought this was connected.
No, there are programs like that, and we've actually helped that organization find producers in our area that are willing to speak. And the ones I went to was Egg for Life, I think it was called, and it was they're running them through the Lethbridge schools. So, and there's also been programs I know in Iron Springs for safety. There's a number of organizations doing work there, and when we're contacted, we always find them producers, and there's always guys willing to promote agriculture. So he's got down here beetle drops. So that's in coordination with the drops we did elsewhere. What we're doing is working with the Old Man Watershed Mainstream group, and we're working with them and providing them with a couple beetle drops where they want. Just gives us a connection to them. So the crop reporting he's doing as well, once a month, agroclimatic reporting as well on weather. He helped set up the water sites, and we still have our riparian area down on the Little Bow. And we're going to keep that, and the reason being we've got Cows and Fish came down there, and they had a field day where they're training their staff and individuals. We've got 2 college classes that are coming in next week, I guess it'll be, 2 consecutive days, classes of 30 or 40. And they're doing, they don't want us to speak, they have the knowledge, they're just using that land as a showcase. So it's working very well, and we're maintaining that, and it certainly shows the benefits of off-stream watering systems. Just more to note with this, we've been asked to speak at the college in November. Me and Matt will go to the college, and we'll do a presentation on the Weed Control Act, the environmental farm plans. Matt can do that as well, but they want enforcement, soil erosion, and pest control as well. So we'll show them. The last meeting we had was a presentation on the Weed Control Act, and I'll take that one, and maybe each time we're invited, we'll reach out and do something different. So we also have a field day that's coming up with the Old Man Mainstream group. So next Friday we're having a field day where we've invited folks from along the river and part of that group, as well as other areas of the county. Cows and Fish is coming. They're going to speak about some of the programs and grants that may be available. Old Man Watershed Council will be there as well, and the lady that from the Alberta Invasive Species Council is going to be there as well. So there's going to be, we're going to talk about, it's an outdoor event, environmental farm plans, like I said, CAP funding opportunities, just a brochure that we've got here, off-stream waters. It's a great way to bring people together and start thinking about riparian health. So that's kind of an exciting event we have for next week. I think we've got around 20 people lined up. And that should cover my report. We do have one more thing I'd like to talk about, and that is declaring an ag disaster. So after last council meeting, I watched, and I've got some points here of maybe questions that need a little more clarification. So declaring an ag disaster at the municipal level, it does not trigger or exclude any producers from any funding options. That's what we're told. However, I mean, everybody's nervous that if you don't declare a disaster, that you're not fully covering your folks. Everybody feels the same way. I've talked to all the ag fieldmen that are connected to Lethbridge County, and many have already declared a disaster, and everybody's nervous they're not going to help their producers to the extent they need to. Municipal declarations, that's to bring attention to the drought situation and support our affected producers. So certainly there are a lot of producers in Lethbridge County that are affected by drought. Dryland guys, dry pastures, the cattle producers, and many other situations that certainly meet the criteria of a disaster situation. The RMA guide, I've gone through that a whole bunch of times. It does not fit well for our situation in Lethbridge County because we're irrigated. But we still have people that are in a dire situation. I mean, I'm sure we all know neighbors, cattle feed is tough to get, and just a tough situation for some. So a provincial declaration, now that could bring additional support, but a declaration, a full declaration by the province, that goes off data. So they're going to wait and see likely what actually is happening out there. They're investigating the cattle issues, and programs have been announced already. So the Alberta government, they do have a website on farming in dry conditions. Google that, it'll come up, all the programs and current up-to-date information. So yesterday it was announced, Agri-Recovery is what they're calling it, the program for cattle producers where they're getting the $200 a head. That's been announced a while back, but I think yesterday was the first day you could start filling out those applications. And from talking to the cattle guys, that first $100 or $94 will come quite quickly by the end of September. The other one, you're going to have to prove that you're in a feed shortage, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary, you were talking about, cattle producers. I think this is mainly focused on cow-calf operation, right?
Yes, I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Gary, the one question I've been asked is, if you do have a state of disaster, is it considered to be better for you applying for a tax deferral if you have to sell your cows? Have you heard anything about that?
I have not.
Okay.
And the point here too, there's no harm in declaring an ag disaster to support your producers. The RMA guide is a guide. I've talked to, there's a group called the Provincial Drought Excessive Moisture Advisory Group. They brought it in a few years ago. It was actually for excessive moisture, the problems they were having. So, I think in 2015, there's a lot of droughts declared. So they wanted to have a set way of handling these situations. It's not a perfect guide. I don't know how much consideration went into the irrigated areas. It's difficult.
Yeah, talking about this one, I mean, there's a lot of people in the irrigated areas that do not have sufficient land for the amount of animals that they have. Like the agriculture disaster program, would that also, would that be for them also if they, well, a lot of them have to buy a lot of feed.
Yeah.
And then the feed that they would have to buy would be a lot more money, of course.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, are these are these covered by that, or you don't have any idea?
I don't know on that, but one thing to note is that high price, there's double-edged sword to high prices. Some people are benefiting from the high prices, and others are obviously hurt. I mean, if you're having to buy a lot of feed, and I don't know how far $200 goes in feeding animals. I wouldn't think that far.
Because that also includes all the grain prices and everything, of course, too, that everybody needs, and even like the feedlots and everything like that.
Yeah.
They're paying a lot more money for the grain.
Yeah, from my understanding, if there's programs available, the crop insurance programs is going to be the main thing for the producers. So if they're covered by insurance, then maybe they can pick up some of that the lost money. But yeah, I'm not as familiar on that part of the high prices affecting large feeding operations. So. There was a declaration made, a motion made last council meeting. So the next step here is to write a letter to the Minister of Agriculture and copy our MLA, MP, and that provincial drought an excessive moisture advisory committee, as well as sending this information out to all ag service boards. Over the last 2 months, they're coming in every day. I'm getting the emails from all the ag service boards that have declared a disaster. There are, I believe, 69 ag service boards in the province. I would say over 30 now are in a disaster situation, right around there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you have an answer for that, Gary, or not, but our neighboring municipalities, they having that disaster application for drought in place for quite a while already, and we haven't yet. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a council's decision if they want to declare a disaster, and then just the RMA guide is not 60% of your crops, cereals have to be in poor condition. Running the crop reports, we don't necessarily meet that in our area with the irrigated areas. The county of Lethbridge, as far as I know, has never declared an agriculture disaster till now. So there's no hurry in declaring a disaster either. The benefit of waiting till now is now you know what you're getting. People were out in their fields in July. I mean, the first disasters were coming in the beginning of July. They didn't know what the outcome would be. Now there's the benefit of knowing exactly what producers have.
It doesn't have no effect anyways, if, the municipalities what haven't applied yet or complied yet, one of the two down there, they're gonna be included anyways if it is gonna be a disaster funding available. So it is more of a formality than anything else, I guess, eh?
It's just a way of promoting what farmers are going through right now at the municipal level. It has no basis when all programs are run off data, what is actually happening. That can be a little bit difficult when pasture situations. I mean, it does, you go up in the north end of the county and at Sundial area and the pastures out there, you just glance once and you know they're in a disaster. Yeah. In other areas too with the dryland farming, yields are, I'm here, stuff is not getting combined in the Monarch area. I mean, you're usually pretty good in that area. And then down south too, there's areas where yields are easily meeting the threshold of being a disaster in the dryland areas.
Just like you said, the majority of them, they have crop insurance anyway, and you coverage coming on that end.
Yep. And then so with the letters to the mentioned organizations, it's also what some municipalities has done is done a media release. With a media release, then you're really exposing that, and then there are going to be media inquiries as well to that. I don't know. Some have done without a media release and just sent the letter of declaration. Others have done the full media. It depends how much attention you want to bring to the situation.
I got one more question for you. And do you know if Alberta Transportation is really cutting back on the mowing and everything? Because on some main highways, like the 519 where we're at and stuff like that, they haven't come by yet.
Yeah, so in talking with Alberta Transportation, their intention was to mow roads only one time this year. So what we're seeing with our mowers, now is the perfect time if you're only doing one pass. There's been a lot of weeds come through. That's our biggest issue, but it's a tough situation. And if you're ever going to do one cut, this was the year.
Gary, do we need a decision today on something on the agricultural disaster?
I think we should bring it back to council for the 16th.
Okay.
We can bring it back with more fulsome report and those recommendations in there.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for your report, Gary. Always just as informative as ever, and lots of great updates you've had. So,
Thank you.
any questions or comments? Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Gary. Just maybe touching on the soil erosion stuff. I know, when it was happening last winter when we were seeing it, I do think that the county being vocal about it, I think that did make an impression on people. I know I talked to people in my area and they're like, the county's putting this out on Facebook, on Twitter. There's articles in the paper. Like, I think it did give some weight to it. I think we all saw it happening. Some of it was just the perfect storm in the sense that, with the winter we had, the freeze, the thaw, the amount of wind we had, the lack of residue that some people deal with. I think the evolution of some of the crops we grow and some of the practices we have, like it really was a perfect storm last year. And I do think that it did help. It made people realize that, maybe I think people felt ashamed. Some people did. You hate to see that blowing away. That's your revenue generator blowing away. So I think it did make an impact. And I think we did see a lot of people out there trying to do something, even if it was just trying to make ridges, trying to rip, throwing manure on. So I think that was encouraging to see. But I also think from that, it's encouraged people to maybe look at it a little bit differently this year. Like, I've already seen people taking off dry beans. They go in with a one-step and windrow the beans, and in between the bean rows, they're putting in ryegrass or a bushel of barley or something like that, or a cover crop. I know the local retailers that I've spoken to have had quite a bit of interest in bringing in cover crops, booking floaters, booking spreaders for when the potatoes, the beans that come off, so they can go blow something on. So I do think that you did bring awareness to that, and I think that's really important that we keep on that. Like, we can't stop. We need to keep putting that message out there, making information available. So I think that's great. And as well, I really like what Matthew's done. Like, I thought that the newsletter was great. Like you said, shift away just from the nutrient management. I felt that kind of got a little repetitive, especially if you weren't a cattle producer and you weren't dealing with manure. It was kind of a glance at it, throw away maybe a little bit, but I felt like this was a lot more fulsome in that it still had some of those elements in it, but it was much broader based. And like you noted, I had people texting me asking about those islands because they'd seen it on Facebook, or I believe there was a Sunny South article, so it's kind of cool. It's not, maybe it's not an intentional focus of what the county does, but I think it was a great example of, bringing some positive press and maybe a little different from the norm. So I was really happy to see that and was happy that it got the traction that it did. So thank you to you and your staff for that.
Yeah, and we've got something good going here. There's a good feeling, and one of the best things we can do to promote agriculture is putting producers in there. The two producers, that'll be something that we hit on every time. We had Shaughnessy Greenhouses and then the Bison Company. They were just stoked. They wanted, in Broxburn Vegetable that did the gardening tips. So yeah, well received on information, not just for producers, but also acreage owners and rural living. So going back to the soil erosion, it's not a fun thing to do, to have to promote and to, it's gut-wrenching sometimes to have to go tell producers they got to do something and now, or we're going to do it for you. But by being proactive, I think it has saved the county money. There is a municipality that didn't do much, and they are, went all summer cleaning out ditches. I mean, it was worse in some areas. They spent between $500,000 and $1 million cleaning out culverts and ditches. I assessed the situation when everything was done. There may have been 10 culverts affected in the county. I give them to the Public Works Department to take care of when they go by. With blow dirt, it always looks worse than it is in the ditch. When its culvert is covered, the first time a hard rain comes, it sinks to halfway down. So it's not as bad as it looks, but we don't want to do that twice, and then you're fully covered and causing drainage issues.
Any more questions or comments for Gary? Morris, go ahead.
I'll move that report.
Thank you.
No problem.
So move the Supervisor Agriculture Services report for information. Any questions? Call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. And moving down to appointments, we have Clean Farms Agriculture Plastics Recycling. I have a presentation from 2 representatives.
Come on up. You have a PowerPoint you want on there? What do you got in there?
Welcome. We can start by introducing ourselves. I'm Steve Campbell, the Chair of the Ag Service Board. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken Benson, bid for Martin Step, Division 7, ran opposed to the feedlots are.
Tory Campbell, Division 2. I farm south of Colville.
Okay. Okie dokie. So I'm Davin Johnson. I'm the Alberta Program Advisor for Clean Farms. I live in West Lethbridge in Copperwood. I was supposed to be in Bonnyville today for the Alberta Care Conference, which is a conference for all the, I guess, the waste commissions and whatnot. They do their in-service training. But Friday it was canceled just due to the new restrictions that come into the province. There was supposed to be a lot of people there and a training and whatnot. So I was able to make it today. Tammy was here on my behalf. She's come into town to do a waste audit actually on one of our programs that we'll talk to you about. She is based out of Moose Jaw and is our Western Program Coordinator. So we're gonna tag team it, might as well, but this was originally supposed to be me coming to chat with you guys, but she has a lot of valuable stuff to chat about. So just to give you a quick overview of Clean Farms, for those of you who don't know, we're industry-led and funded stewardship organization. So we are primarily funded by industry, apart from our pilot programs where we have funding from provincial, federal government, and some other organizations. You'll notice a lot of those logos there are familiar to you. These are our members right now, 70 plus of them, that represent all sections of agriculture. So essentially what we do is primarily ag plastic recycling, but as well ag wastes that are non-organic wastes. Farmers use these products, they bring them to a form of collection site, whether it's a municipal transfer station or landfill, or to a retailer. And then depending on that product, we organize the management of getting it to end markets, so a recycling facility or safe disposal. A very brief program history. Most folks in here would be familiar with the pesticide container, 1989. That started in Alberta. That was actually started by the province. And that's the empty small containers that are for collection. So they're throughout municipal sites in the province. CropLife Canada got involved in it at that point, assisting with it. We have obsolete pesticides. I'm not going to go through the whole list because you guys can have this presentation after and then give us questions just because of limited time. 2010, that's the big thing. That's when Clean Farms was formed and kind of took this over. And you'll see in the last few years, there's just a host of programs that have come online, from grain bags to seed pesticide inoculant bags, bale wrap, silage film, twine. We're just adding to the list of materials that we recover for farmers across Canada. So in Alberta, there's 6 programs. We have 3 permanent programs and 3 pilot programs right now. The permanent programs, the under 23 liter pesticide containers, that's the one that started 31 years ago. We have totes and drums, unwanted pesticide, livestock, equine medication. The pilot programs, so we're fortunate in Lethbridge because I'm here. So the very bottom one, the bale and silage film, that is only in Lethbridge County. No other place in the province. We're piloting it here just because of being able to manage it, and it's interesting. I'll show you how we're dealing with it. Seed pesticide inoculant bags, and then the grain bags and twine. So to give you a quick overview of the permanent programs, that the under 23 liters, this is returned to municipal sites in Alberta. So this is the transfer stations and landfills. One of the biggest things that we've added to it last year was collection bags. So previously farmers would bring them in loose to a container site. So a fenced area at the transfer station. If you go out to Iron Springs, Nobleford, you'll see them. It's just a fenced area. So farmers can bring them in loose, but to help manage it, one of the feedback that we got was we need a better way to transport them. They're blowing out of the trucks, whatnot. So to help increase collection rates across the country, we provide these collection bags at the point of purchase at the retail in the spring, and then the farmers can fill those up with their empty containers, bring them back to the collection site. And then, so again, you'll have access to this presentation where you can click on the links and it provides all further information for each of these programs. So what's in, what's out. With this program, it's pesticide and fertilizer containers. What's not included? I guess things like, that wouldn't
A
be.
lot of the dairy producers
Yeah.
that would, you know, other cleaners and stuff that the dairy producers would provide is mainly, basically if it has a PCP number.
Yeah. And then our drums and totes, this is a return to retail in the province. So bringing back the empty drums, this is non-deposit bulk containers. So many farmers will bring back their bulk containers that they pay a deposit on, because obviously they're getting the deposit back. So we've just been working with retailers for better communication, that bringing these drums and totes back to them even though there's no deposit. And it's, all of our programs are free to the producer. So for participation, depending on the program, it's either, you know, the member builds it into the price, the cost of the product, or there's, on some products, like in Saskatchewan for grain bags, which is a permanent program, there's an environmental handling fee at the point of purchase. And then, very important for us this year is the unwanted pesticide and livestock medication collections. So this is anything that's old, obsolete, registrations have been withdrawn. It's essentially like a household hazardous waste, but for agricultural chemicals, commercial class chemicals. Southern Alberta is happening this October 25th to 29th. The closest locations, we rotate it, so this is on a 3-year rotation. So Southern Alberta will be in another 3 years. It'll be 2024. And they rotate to give equal participation throughout the province or the region. So last time, I believe, one of the locations, these are always at a retail location, I believe last time there was a UFA in Lethbridge. This year, there's no spot in Lethbridge specifically. The closest is Tabor or McGrath to, you know, our county. And yeah, so there's 20 sites throughout this that are very specifically chosen for low distance, so that a farmer doesn't have to drive any more than, I think it's 50 or 60 kilometers to access one of these sites. That's the ideal range. Obviously, there's some lenience there. So anything, again, that's commercial class, pesticide with a PCP number, livestock medication that have the DIN numbers on them, and then unknown things that have been sitting in a Quonset somewhere that may not have a label, but ideally are agricultural related. And so again, this is free for the producers. We have a waste contractor that comes and they consolidate it on the site. And then it's taken back and bulked up, and that's sent for high temperature incineration for safe disposal.
For that program too, you wanna make sure like there's no pre-collection. There's a Clean Farms hires a hazardous waste collection crew that can treat any of the pesticides that are coming in as they see them. There's no pre-drop off or anything like that. So that's the day, so that's the week, that's the day at particular sites across southern Alberta. There's no pre-drop off, post-drop off, or anything like that. It's just that day. So that can be all handled appropriately.
And so in terms of our pilot programs, these are the two big ones right now that are getting, I guess, the most press. Across the province, there's a 3-year pilot, which the provincial government provided $1 million in funding for. This is for collecting grain bags and twine. It's led by a multi-stakeholder group called the Agricultural Plastics Recycling Group, and we operate the program. We operate the permanent program for grain bags in Saskatchewan, as well as a permanent program in Manitoba for grain bags and twine. And so this is held at any waste transfer site. Well, not any, but there's, on the next slide I'll show you. I can't remember the exact number because we've just added more. But this gives you some numbers for the collection totals. So since we started collecting on October 1st, 2019 through to June 30th, shows you the volumes of what we've collected in the province, and then I broke it out by the county. So in Gary's presentation, he mentioned DBS Environmental. They've been very instrumental in this across the province, not just in the county. They help move and collect the plastics across multiple sites and bring them to the recycling facilities. Twine, they've been helping with actually collecting it at hay processors, direct pickup, not just at the collection sites. And so we have 33 partners. That would be like Lethbridge County, or DBS holds the agreement. The county was going to, but however it worked out, DBS is doing it. But Drumheller, you can see on the map there, these are the partners. So the sites added, there was 20 sites added in 2019, then additional in 2020, and then more in 2021. We're investigating a couple more. There's 84 individual locations, which is transfer stations essentially. So we pick up grain bags at all of the 33 sites, and then typically within the counties they'll collect twine at all their transfer stations and consolidate it at one location for us to pick up. Because twine, it comes in a big industrial sized bag that we provide the collection bags. It's easy enough to throw one or two in a pickup when the transfer station attendant's going to check the different stations and bring it to a main site for us to pick up. I'm going to let Tammy talk about this because she has the most experience with grain bags and how to prepare it properly and the issues with it, just for your guys' knowledge.
Yeah, I've been a professional agrologist in Saskatchewan for 13 years now, and kind of did this grain bag thing off the side of my desk for the last 11 years, and then I made the transition to Clean Farms 4 years ago to do this basically full time. So what I really like about our job is you guys don't necessarily, like the workers, the worker bees, the front end staff don't necessarily have to worry too much about the programs themselves. You see the big green check mark, they accept that material, rolled, secured material. Once you have a certain amount or you need to get rid of it, basically you call us, we take care of the rest. So a lot of time can be spent in the recycling markets, finding end markets, shipping, handling, logistics. We handle all of that, so we do that as a full-time job. But there is some little bit of educational material. So if there's anyone can take some of this back to your constituency, is rolled secured material like you see in the far left-hand picture. The one that says hand rolled bags, dirty is not the problem. Our recyclers do have the equipment to handle dirt, mud, spoiled grain, those types of things. It has to be rolled and secured. This particular picture I took from one of the collection sites in Saskatchewan. It took 5.5 hours to load one semi-truck, and it usually takes an hour and a half. So rolled secured material makes it quick and easy for the contractors, makes it life easy for the semi-driver, makes life easy for the recyclers to unload the material, and the world goes around, right? When it's rolled, excessively, you can just imagine a 300-pound piece of plastic sitting on top of another 300-pound piece of plastic, and it's like grandma's yarn. So it's very difficult for contractors to move through the material if you see any of these other things going on. And when you start to get other plastic, the number one issue is other plastic contamination. So you can see in the far right-hand picture, there's twine, net wraps, snow fence, and miscellaneous other material, and it's not secured, so it's kind of all mixed in. So it's really important that anyone bringing in this material, that it's rolled, secured. Some recyclers are particular about the size. That's why we picked the beautiful clean white and black round bale of a grain bag. Some are particular about size. We're not too worried about that. Roll it, secure it, bring it into one of our collection sites, and we can handle it. The wood that you see in the loose drop-offs, a lot of producers, if you're unaware of how grain bags work, they have a mechanism that will actually fill the grain bag. It stretches like a balloon. It's one-time use, and then it's cut, extracted, rolled up, and recycled. The wood, they usually put 2 pieces of wood on either end and kind of roll the ends up together like a Ziploc bag. And then that holds the ends together so that maybe pests or something, or grain doesn't spill out. So, this material actually was in the bottom of some beautifully rolled material on top. So, at each of the collection sites, they do have to be babysat a little bit to make sure that the bad apples don't get in there, and that tipping fees, service fees, or any other fees are charged if there's non-program or non-properly prepared material in the truck.
I'd just like to say, so if you're speaking with any of your constituents, the biggest issue that we find in the county here at the transfer station is that they'll bring in a rolled grain bag, excuse me, but they've rolled it off their extractor. And the old extractors, essentially, it's the same thing as hand rolling it. So it's a loose, fluffy piece of plastic. If you can imagine one of these grain bags, if you haven't seen one there, the average size is 300 feet long by 10 feet in diameter. It's a massive single-use piece of plastic. When it comes to the farm to be filled, it fits in a box that's 2 by 4 by 2 feet. It's very tightly compact. Rolls out to make that massive slug that you see in the field. When it's extracted, it's a big piece of plastic. If you just hand roll it manually, you end up, or if you just took a loader and squished it together, you'll fill the back of a tandem truck. And that weighs 500 pounds. So filling the back of a tandem truck weighing 500 pounds versus if you roll it into the picture of the machine rolled on the left with the proper roller, which the county has and rents out, you make a 4 by 4 by 3 foot tight bale, which weighs 500 pounds. You can put 18 tons on a semi-trailer and transport that. So it's just like any other commodity, is that increasing the weight to be able to ship it efficiently, and then also just, Tammy mentioned the loading time. So if you can encourage your producers to use and rent the roller, which I believe there's no cost for renting the county's roller, over just using their extractor and then just kind of manhandling it and getting it to a site, because that's where Gary said DBS has been very good. They'll actually rent the roller, DBS will, and on their own time and their cost, re-roll them for us so that it's manageable. Otherwise, if we were to come in and send a contractor who in this situation is DBS, if they aren't rolled properly, that material has to be landfilled, because it's the recyclers won't handle it. They can't handle it. Their equipment for putting it through their shredding system, it's just so hard to handle big loose pieces of plastic. So that's the biggest takeaway, is just trying to get your producers to rent the roller and use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same reason. And the rollers are actually really powered really well. So if I were to pull up to a roller with this loose material, as long as you get the first 10 or 15 feet started, it should be able to suck that material out. And they're very thick. It is all recyclable material. Like I said, it's not so much the dirt and the spoiled grain, although cleanliness is better than dirt. They can handle that. It's the contamination with other plastics and making sure it's secured.
Just to put this into perspective too, the photo on the right, that's one grain bag that dimensionally it's about 8 by 20 by 7 feet high, that pile. That same bag could be condensed into 3 by 4 by 4. So, and it's 500 pounds.
And pulled with a half-ton truck and a flatbed trailer rather than a tandem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, with the people I've been talking to, everybody thinks it's a great idea. It's really great, everything that you do here, but there's gotta be a better way to, collect this stuff. And the rolling machine and everything like that, it does work, but what people are complaining about, it's an awful lot of work. And that's the thing that keeps a lot of people from not recycling their plastic. And it's too bad because, I mean, there's all this other stuff goes into landfill. And that is, and we've seen it at the Lethbridge landfill here too, that, you know, there's so much plastic in there that could have been done. Is there no other way to have a compressor truck or something like that? Like you got the garbage trucks, but then they compress the stuff, and that you collect the stuff that way instead of only with the roller bags? Because you probably have, like I would say, thousands of tons more if we would have a different way of being able to collect it.
It's been, my experience, the quicker it's rolled on farm, the less contamination is gonna happen with that bag or that material. If they roll it and they have to store it for a year or two even, that's fine. We prefer not to stockpile them, but rolling it as soon as that grain is extracted is the best solution to get this material to a recycling market.
So, but would there not be, I'm just talking about, but we could go in a different way. If you have the smaller rollers or whatever, that a person could have the roller himself on the farm. Because you've got a lot of these bigger farms, they go through a lot of plastic, and they do not want to take the effort to go pick up the roller and try to get that the bale done that way, because I mean that there's a very big amount of manpower involved in that, and I think that is probably the biggest drawback. But if we can get it done that you can, you know, have smaller baggers or balers or whatever there is, because even balers would work probably, I mean, in smaller bales.
So to answer your question, it's just literally about managing it when you're extracting it. So most extractors that are on the market, their roller on it rolls it loose, and then they have to unroll it to get it off and then hand roll it. There's a couple new extractors that you could purchase, but who's going to buy their new extractor when they go to, it's, you know, $180,000 piece of equipment, and not everyone needs to replace it right now. Those have proper rollers on the back. Like Tammy said, if I've seen farmers that have taken a post hole auger with the flights broke off and put that on like a PTO motor or on their skid steer, and they roll it up. If you drive up to an extracted grain bag and you have the roller like the one the county has, it takes 3 minutes, not even, to roll that grain bag. It's like incredibly fast. Wheatland County goes and rolls every grain bag for their residents for them. They go out to the field and roll every single one. They can do that because they have a recycler in their backyard and they can take it there and get the revenue, and it offsets costs. So using a hay baler, some farmers do that and it works very well. It makes a very dense, bigger bales if they put multiple through, but that's acceptable. The thing is, for us, it doesn't have to be on that specific roller, just densified in some form. So yes, like you're saying, some form of a compactor. The issue a bit with the compactors, so like DBS or other waste management companies have a baler, like a cardboard baler. They can put pieces of silage plastic in there, and it compresses it very well densely, and it ties it off with steel twines. When it gets to the recycler and they cut those twines, there's so much pressure that it goes, and they have a massive explosion of pieces of plastic everywhere. If it was one grain bag, the difficulty in feeding one bag through there is incredibly tough, which is why the solution that's started in Saskatchewan is a roller. It's been tested as the most effective way to densify it.
And as quickly as possible. So like if you have a mess like this, it will take time.
Yep.
But that's the idea, is to deal with it as you're extracting the grain, you know, maybe in 3s or 4s, rather than bringing it all to the farm, piling it up and then dealing with it, yeah, it's gonna take a lot of time, and, diesel's expensive, so a lot of people dump diesel on these to burn them, and it's not a good solution, so I think everything takes time. There is a lot of risks to disposing of it in a non-environmentally friendly manner, but I think just dealing with it one at a time, 3 or 4 at a time, is manageable when it only takes a few minutes to roll.
What I'm more referring to is like, you got we got Feedlot Alley here, and there's so much plastic being wasted and going to the landfill, and that's what I was hammering on, trying to solve that problem, that people will make it as easy as possible for these people to be able to recycle their plastic.
That's coming up in the next slides, that plastic. That's a separate type of plastic that looks the same, but it's just managed differently. So, twine, we can quickly say that.
Yeah, basically twine only. Net wrap is different plastic. It's typically made out of high-density polyethylene. Twine is polypropylene. So basically, if it looks different, it needs to be kept separate. So I usually joke around and say, I don't care if it's a Ziploc bag of twine, it's the process, right? So getting that twine to the bag, to the recycler, is an important process. And what's really cool about twine is Alberta's in a unique position where you guys produce more twine than anywhere else in Western Canada, and then you create that balance for the rest of Western Canada to be able to have these programs as well. Saskatchewan kind of does that with the grain bags. So we continue to supply the Alberta recycling facilities with grain bags, just like Alberta's going to be able to supply the recycling facilities with twine. If I want a steak tonight from a farm, I probably should have ordered my cow 6 months ago, right? It's the same, with every type of a processing of a commodity, they need truckloads of this stuff. If I call them up and say, I'll have a truckload of twine next year, they'll be like, don't bother. So when we have a consistent feedstock into a recycler, then we can continue to build the program. So twine only, try and reduce the amount of hay or straw or anything, or manure, or snow and ice. There's actually holes in the bottoms of the bag to drain the snow and ice if it gets nice and warm in there, and it can just drain out. So go ahead.
Yeah, just more photos.
Ugly pictures of what we do get. It is actually fairly easy to sort out. Me and 2 other people sorted out 10 tons of net wrap and twine all smushed together in a day. So it was really good. It's just a matter of keeping it separate, and we don't have a program for net wrap, and I know that's a major concern, but we can do twine.
And just high volume twine users, just a nice story for our county is there's 3 hay processors that feed a lot of twine to the program, helping create that volume and the economy of scale.
I'm just behind you here.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
And mainly I want to touch on seed, pesticide, and inoculant bags. This is a pilot. 45 sites were in the south central region of Alberta. The entire province is going to be covered in 2022 for that season. The entire province of Saskatchewan and Manitoba are also on board. And once again, DBS is our contractor for this. Small bags are bagged. Large bulk totes are bundled together in 5s and 6s, basically in some sort of manageable form so that they can throw it onto a truck. This is all returned to ag retail, and for only seed, pesticide, and inoculant bags. We are working with some private industry to bring up that economy of scale, but we're hoping that the transition is just as smooth as Eastern Canada. That's been running for 5 years now.
And the last program, pilot program, so this is federal funding for bale wrap and silage plastic, because you said it, Feedlot Alley. We have a lot of silage plastic, a lot of dairies in the county, so a lot of bale wrap. Silage film is essentially the same type of plastic as a grain bag. It's just managed differently. So silage plastic will cover a bunker of feed just on the top, or it'll be a tube like a grain bag with the feed in it. However, it's not like grain bags. They're cut open and extracted, and you still have one massive sheet of plastic. With silage film, the farm will cut off a section to expose the front face of the bunker of feed to feed their animals that week or 2 weeks. Just enough for that. So you end up with 4 to 12 foot wide strips that are 20 to 150 feet long. This is the problem where you stick it in a manual baler, tighten it up. It's beautiful for transporting, but when it gets to a recycler and they remove the ties, it explodes and you have short pieces of plastic, which their equipment's set up to take a piece and it feeds in on a conveyor into a shredding system. So what we've been working on is, again, the issue is bulking up, densifying the plastic. That is the biggest challenge with any recycling program, is densifying it to get enough weight to justify the trucking costs to get it to a recycling facility. So Full Circle Plastics, they're based out of Nobleford. They make dimensional lumber out of recycled plastic. They designed a baling system for us, which is used on farm, and we also have it at all the transfer sites in the county. DBS Environmental, because they operate the transfer stations, they've been helping operate, move material around and whatnot. And so essentially this is what it looks like. It's drill stem pipe with 4 walls of recycled plastic. You could do lumber with this. And there's a top lid that swivels across winch to lift it up and down, and there's a chain hoist used on the back, so it's manual. There's no power required. It can be put anywhere in a field, wherever a bunker is for feed, where that plastic is. Plastic is folded and put in there, so just a photo from the back. The chain hoist is used manually to compress the plastic. So all we're asking farmers already, or the feedlots, what they typically do, there's 3 things. They will fold it, roll it, and take it to the transfer station, which is, we can work with that to get them to just fold it into squares, which is what we want, so that you can just lay the squares in so that they compress nicely. The other thing they do is they burn it, which nobody wants happening, but I'm sure everybody's seen the black plumes in the county, typically at night, or they dig a hole and bury it on the farm. I've chatted with many of the very large feedlots here, and they haven't really had options, and so we're testing this and seeing the feasibility of doing this. To take a piece of plastic, a piece of plastic like this, and fold it and prepare it for this machine, myself doing it on a windy day, I tested it in the worst conditions possible at Monarch Feeders. I went out there, they have one of them. I did it myself with them watching, just to show them. Took me about 3 minutes to handle the plastic and fold it up properly and put it in the machine. What they were doing before, Monarch was really great. They were actually taking the roller that you guys have, rolling a piece, tying the next piece to it, and keep rolling. Very labor intensive to manage their plastic. They're very happy to use this to fold it and put it in. The biggest concern for many of the larger feedlots is the time commitment. It's gonna take us time. Normally we just take our plastic with a loader, put it in the BFI bin, and it gets hauled away. So those bins, again, it's bulky plastic. If they can remove that out of there, their costs go down. So testing it on a few of these feedlots, as well as a couple dairies, hopefully get the message across, and we can expand it further to more of them using it. But essentially all they need to do is fold the plastic into 4-foot bundles, 4x4, put it in, you compress it down one time, manually lift it up, compress it a second time, tie it off with twine, 6 strands of twine. There's space in the bottom for forks, for equipment, forklift to lift it out, because that bale that is 4x4 by 2.5 feet, that weighs 560 pounds, that one does. So lifting it manually is not gonna happen. There's a bale kicker that we installed. It can all be run manually without power or other equipment. So to put this visually in perspective, all that plastic in that little 42 by 42 by 31 inch bale, that filled a 10-yard roll-off bin. We took a bin from Iron Springs that was brought in by the feedlots, which was the hand-rolled stuff. So a 10-yard roll-off bin is 8 feet wide, 6 feet high, and 18 or so feet long. So that was all full, and it turned into this, weighing 566 pounds. So you can stick fill an entire semi-load full of this and overweight the axle weight of the semi to get it to the recyclers. And our test loads have already gone to the recyclers in the province. There's 2 in the province that handle grain bags. One of them will take this. We have another market in the US that will take it as well. And so there is now a solution. The bale wrap, we're also working on testing, getting the bale wrap to compress it down, same thing. And so Lethbridge County is the pilot, the poster child for it. And that is it. Any questions beyond what's already been asked?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to go back to the jugs and the bags are awesome. As a producer, I think the bags are great. I used to always twine them, just because I know the Lethbridge or the Coldell site always appreciated that. But the bags are way nicer, easier to handle, and I know the retail that I had, they would just give you an entire roll because unfortunately they didn't have huge take up, but it worked out great for me. But a great product. I thought that was a really good change. I realized that you're focused on the plastic side of things. And I realize that we here in the county with the waste transfer sites, we do have some recycling capability. Has there ever been any thought given to possibly adding a cardboard element just because all those jugs we're bringing in come out of a box? Has there been any appetite to maybe entertain that? I've always been a little hesitant myself. I mean, that's, if we're talking about time and work, breaking down boxes is way more work and a way bigger pain than dealing with the jugs. Has there ever been any thought to tying that together, possibly?
I can start and you can finish. So, yes, we're constantly working on this. So we actually have what's called a Sustainable Packaging Committee, which is with our members, so the folks that make the products, to find better ways of how to package everything so that we reduce the waste, first of all, that comes to the farm. So how can it be packaged differently in the boxes, the jugs, whatever, to make it more recyclable? Breaking down the boxes, I understand that's a challenge. In terms of the recycling, if they're clean, which they should be if you just take it straight out and you don't put an empty jug back in it, it can be recycled in the normal municipal cardboard recycling. But then yes, breaking down is a concern. Depending on the site across the province, some of them will take them unbroken down because they have a cardboard compactor.
Okay.
And so it doesn't matter. So it would be checking with, I don't know if I know Iron Springs has a compactor, but I think that's for all their other big things like couches. I'm not sure about the cardboard. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just that as long as it isn't contaminated, like if you're punching the jugs in the chem handler and then putting them in the cardboard.
I know I've done that. This year I really tried not to do that, but I would, like you said, you'd put them in the handler, pop them, and then throw them in the box. And then I had a big cage that I would throw everything into, but I never felt comfortable taking the cardboard into the municipal site then after that.
Yeah, municipal site or even the egg retailer. So a lot of the egg retailers that you bought the product from will have some sort of cardboard bin for you to throw that stuff in when you're bringing back your jugs.
Typically in Saskatchewan, Alberta, it's a municipal site.
Oh, right. Sorry, yes. And then the other thing that Clean Farms at beyond our level is working on is decoupling the surfactant with heat or something like that, so that the bigger boxes aren't so big anymore. You actually buy the jugs separately.
Well, and the worst is your clethodim, right? It's your centurion, your grassy, right? Those are the worst because you have 3 liters of clethodim with your amigo, your adjuvant or whatever, and they do 40 acres. So, there's so many.
They're working on, like she said, decoupling them so that you don't get so much of it.
And and maybe just a second question, just to follow up on what Claus asked about the like. I know there's work that goes into this, but I mean I think it's the right thing to do. But I know you can't always convince people to do the right thing. So has there been any? And I know there has been conversation because I believe you mentioned Saskatchewan offers it to incentivize. Like for my 432 liter of Liberty, it's like I think it's $500 at my retail for the deposit. has there been any appetite to place deposits on the bags, on the silage wrap, on that kind of stuff, so that we see more uptake? Or I realize that's some murky water, but just a question.
It's a good question, because it came up, it's come up, you know, before regulation in Saskatchewan and all the way through, and now it's, you know, it's a regulation in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So, the idea is to try and harmonize because the grain bag, for sellers are the same. So, the problem is when we did the calculation with having some sort of a return deposit system, is right now there's 25 cents a kilogram on every grain bag. Works out to be about $50 a grain bag. So the producer does pay that. It's a visible fee, and they never see it again. In order to make that a return deposit system, the administrative burden of having that system in place creates almost a $75 environmental handling fee plus whatever the return deposit fee is. So say it'd be about $175 because it's just administrative burdensome. So with every province, we do have these silos that operate. We're governed by boards, an overarching board of clean farms, plus every province, like we have the APRG, in Saskatchewan we have the SASC, in Manitoba we kind of blended the two together. They kind of oversee that, and it can be different per province, long story short. Right now, it's a visible fee, environmental handling fee, one time, and it's gone, to try and keep the administrative burden as low as possible. And then it's my job to try and reduce those fees over the course of the year. And it does look like those fees will be reduced over time.
So a deposit system costs more to the user, much more than an environmental handling fee. So when you pay for oil or paint or electronics, there's the environmental handling fee. If there was a deposit system, the environmental handling fee portion that you don't get back would be exponentially higher. So there's still that built in somewhere. When you look at like the bottle system, there's still someone's paying for the recycling. The money that comes back for the bottles that aren't returned does not cover the program. So like she was saying, that it's 50 cents a bag, it would be, or sorry, $50 on average a bag. You'd add an extra 25 and then the deposit. So there's still like, it increases the cost, and that's a factor that's.
Now, provincially though, so this is where we kind of would have a line drawn in the sand. So say in Saskatchewan, we plateau at 70%, and the regulation said you have to be at 75% by 2025 or whatever it may be. Then we have to start thinking, okay, how are we going to get that extra 5% of material? Then we start talking about, okay, what is the cost of the program? How can we get more material? You know, seeking other options, with one of those options being some type of return deposit system. If all of a sudden we have this regulatory goal that we have to meet by a certain date, and we aren't meeting that goal voluntarily from producers, from voluntary programs, then we can start, you know, figuring out, okay, so we don't want to increase costs unnecessarily initially, if that makes sense. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just getting back to the cardboard, I know the last time I was there, they wouldn't take any boxes that came with a chemical in them, whether it was a herbicide or a pesticide or whatever. So I ended up having to take them home and burn them. Like, have they changed their mind any?
Which transfer station?
That was the one in Coaldale.
Okay. How long ago was that?
Not that long ago, actually.
Okay. It could be, so it's how they manage them, and then it could be the transfer station attendant that was there. I'll check with them. We're actually heading to DBS today, so to find out. But I'm not sure. It varies across the province based on each site's managed by whatever organization, Waste Commission usually, and then a contracted service provider. So kind of their rules of how they collect things. It could be in the past that they've gotten too many containers, like cardboard boxes, that were just filthy and full of residual pesticides, that they're just like, no, we're not taking any, it doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's perfectly clean, just no across the board. So I can't answer that, but I'll check for sure, and I can get back to you guys.
Any more questions or comments? Guess not. Well, thank you for your presentation. You're doing a great job of trying to reduce waste from our producers and by adding more and more things every year. So keep up the good work.
Yep, and if any questions come up, you guys have my contact. I'm, like I said, I'm in town, so I'm pretty
Okay.
easy to reach and can get you answers for anything and any of your constituents.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Motion for information, anybody? Lauren, thank you. Call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. And we have Senator Pam Davison here, so we'll just take a recess for the time being. Okay. Back at it, Gary?
We are.
Okay, the next on the agenda is G1, the South Region Ag Service Board Conference.
So South Region Ag Service Board Conference is held every year, of course, and we go over the resolutions and keep involved with the South Region. This year it is intended to be in Cardston on the October the 6th. And of course, that'll be up in the air whether it's in person or online. Any questions regarding the South Region Conference?
What time in the morning does it start?
Usually they start 9 o'clock, but we haven't received anything. And I think folks are holding off just to see on COVID and whether it can actually happen.
For you, 5 o'clock.
Pardon me?
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock in the morning? Then I can make it.
So hopefully in a few weeks we'll have a little more idea what may or may not happen, I guess. And
When I know, I'll forward it through Ann to council, and when we'll see who wants to go.
okay, Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the time being, would you still like this, the recommendation that's here, Gary? Do you want to still go ahead with that for the time being?
I think we can, or we can just add or have a virtual one like we did last year here in the office, if that's available. And then it's done with. We don't have to bring it back.
Okay, I'd move the recommendation then, Mr. Chairman, that the ASB recommend to County Council that any member of the Agriculture Service Board wishing to attend the South Region Conference in Cardston County on October 6, 2021 be permitted to do so.
Thank you, Tori. And since it goes to council, we'll go through it again in whatever, 2 or 3 weeks probably anyway. So
Yeah.
any questions or comments? Call for the question. Those in favor? Carried.
And just a note on the provincial conference, I didn't mention that in my report. It's intended to be a live person event too at the end of January in Edmonton at the Westin Hotel. I believe it's the 26th or something like that is the start date. But everything's up in the air and everything is rolling out slowly.
Okay, G2, the ASB terms of reference.
So the Agriculture Service Board, we've created terms of reference, and this is how the ASB structure is structured and is to function. And it's going to replace a couple existing policies that we've had. This is we've never really had a proper terms of reference on how everything is spelled out, on how many are involved, and precisely how our Ag Service Board runs. Jeremy did a lot of work on this one, and maybe he wants to speak as well.
Yeah, just as per the MGA, any standing committees of council, so the ASB board being a very important committee of council, has to have a terms of reference. So this was one of the ones that was identified as one of the committees that we have that does not have a terms of reference, basically for guidelines and so on for the governance process. Is there any questions in regards to what's contained within? It's fairly straightforward as far as the layout, and it's in a similar format to some of our previous terms of reference. Very much we took the existing one for the Emergency Advisory Committee, obviously reworded it, rebranded it essentially to be for the ASB purposes.
And I'll just flow through it a little bit, touch on a few things. So the purpose is, this is why Agriculture Service Boards exist. Kind of lays out that it comes from the ASB Act. The scope, the Ag Service Board Act allows us to have certain responsibilities. The bullet points there, that is straight from the Ag Service Board Act on our responsibilities that apply. And of course, moving down, the legislation that enables us to carry out our functions are the Weed Control Act, Soil Conservation Act, the Ag Pest Act, and to some degree, if there ever was an animal health emergency, we'd be involved with that as well. So the official formation, it just says the legislation that allows us to form an Ag Service Board, as well as what the makeup of the Ag Service Board is. So our Ag Service Board currently is made up of all of council. And also, in addition, it has the CAO, the Director of Public Operations, and then myself. And those administrative duties are non-voting. And I, with the help of the executive assistant to the CEO, we schedule the meetings and set up everything that you've seen here today. So the goals and objectives, that's just what we plan to do as an Ag Service Board. And the governance, it's just a simple moved or carried, and it's got to be 4 of 7. Also 4 of 7 to make so you can have a meeting. Authority and responsibility. So the committee is absolutely separate from council, so it can't do any of the functions that are intended for council. So there's only limited things we can do. That's why you see many of the motions here are forwarded to county council. So if it was a separate board, I mean, that's how that would work. And then this terms of reference will be reviewed every 5 years.
Seems simple enough, straightforward. Any questions, comments? Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, we've had this one before, haven't we?
It wasn't specifically stated how this committee ran. We weren't able to find anything that stated that our committee was made up of all of county council. So this spells it out more directly. It'd be especially helpful for new council when you're how do things run. Well, you can go through these terms of reference and have a better understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move the recommendation that this be moved to council for approval.
Thank you, Dory. Any questions? Seeing none, call for the question. Those in favor? Carried. And next on the agenda is the Ag Service Board level of service. Gary and Jeremy, go ahead.
So as well, Jeremy and myself have been working on this for quite some time. A lot of work going into this one to just describing everything we do in a level of service document. This document mirrors our Agriculture Service Board grant, so we're obliged to meet the requirements of our grant and do the things as best we can that we said we would. So everything that we've done here takes into consideration our ASB grant obligations. So the intention is that we'll create this document, and then through budget, if things need to be added or subtracted, that's the time likely to do that. And this just gives us clear direction on what we're going to do and a clear understanding for council of what our level of service is. So we'll move down to the actual document. Nice little spray truck on the front. So the purpose and considerations of level of service, like we said, it takes into account what we do regarding our legislated activities and what we said we were going to do. Our scope of responsibilities, well, we're basically vegetation management. We do mowing and spraying activity along with some parks and a few other activities, tree removal. So also do a little bit of work for transportation. So what is the level of service? Well, it's the expectation of our rural citizens and community that we have a standardized level of service that they can count on, and if they need to ask for something more that's comes through budget, we just can't go on the fly our resolution of council that if we're going to do something that more than we said we're going to do in the budget. So now we get into the actual meat of it, and one of the areas is delivery and support of the Weed Control Act. This is an area that is mirrored, like I said, in our Ag Service Board grant. The bullet points here, weed notices, weed extension, leafy spurge, etc., those are all our policies that relate to the Weed Control Act, and they're found in the appendix at the back of this document. So this is going to be the new form we see our policies. So every year when we bring this back, previously I would review a policy one at a time and sort of carry them out through a number of years. It'll be easier to change those policies and bring it back for changes all at once a year, And then we're reviewing our policies every year as well. So our level of service measures, in that area, what you're going to find, that's part of our Ag Service Board grant. It come directly out of there. These are the things we said we were going to do. So this is a better format than the grant for sure. It's easier to read, and it just states all we do. And we're going to, such things as having weed inspectors, the amount of the municipality right away that will be sprayed. You guys have heard me that we always spray a third. Every year it's going to be brought in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, Gary. It says 2 weed inspectors will be continuously appointed. So do you still have that one, we used to have that weed inspector who did a multitude of counties? You still have that person in place that worked in different municipalities as well as ours?
We do not have that position anymore. So it was a year ago, it was decided to, a number of counties didn't want to be involved anymore. So if you wanted to contract that person, you had to do it on an individual county basis. And the person that was doing that was to contact the counties and provide a presentation on what he would do for you. He did not contact Lethbridge County to provide any services or give us any fees. So we don't have that one anymore. And the 2 weed inspectors that are continuously appointed, by nature of my position, I am a weed inspector. So then we also have the assistant ag fieldman that is a weed inspector. We don't use him as much in that function as we have a seasonal weed inspector as well. So weed inspection isn't just during the season. We go to the seed plants and we take samples and we're going through weed content. We get calls, blowing kochia and things like that we have to deal with as well. So you need somebody always available to do that work. So, and then the level of service, the measures there, that's just everything that I'm bringing back to the Ag Service Board meetings and reporting on. That's why I'm reporting on all those activities, because the government requires me to do that as well. So, moving on, support of the Ag Pests Act. So that's the next act we deal with. A little bit less money there because we're not intensive work. I mean, weed spraying brings lots of work. So there's all of our policies that dealt with that, from the Norway rat, coyote, skunks, pest surveys for the province. And then we get down, it's the same thing. These level of measures from our grant states what we said we were going to do. Moving a little further, the next area, it's the third act we deal with. It's the Soil Conservation Act. Budget amount here, usually not very much. We don't have to deal with soil conservation for as much as usually. This year we'll be well over that with some of the contracts we're paying out, and we're just having to balance the budget, taking away from something to spend a little bit more here because it's there's been a lot of soil erosion. And we can, if things continue, we can always change those budgeted amount and put in a more concerted effort. Next up, as we mentioned, the Animal Health Act we deal with. So that one we hope we never have to deal with, but we keep folks up to date. We go to annual in-service training, and the reasons to be if anything should happen regarding an animal health issue that we're ready for it. There's no budgeted amount here, and if there ever was somewhere where we'd have to put money, it would have to be come in front of council as pulling from a reserve, I would imagine. Resource management, the rural extension program. This is part of our grant agreement as well. There's our level of service measures, and I'll go through this one a little bit more precisely so you'll continue to have an understanding on that position. We do receive the $91,000 a year for this position. This year's budget amount was on $165,000. That's a low number because of rural extension activities have been a little less with COVID for sure. But things are really starting to pick up with environmental farm plans and CAP funding. So as well, it's the riparian areas we're worried about. We continue to work with the Old Man Watershed Council, Cows and Fish, the newsletter, and we are working with commercial manure haulers and getting that information out on their responsibilities on how to apply manure properly as per the AOPA guidelines. Moving down.
Oh, and Gary, so with the extension program, we did, last year, we got cut provincial grants on that one, is that correct?
Yes, there was no money that come in for well past when they give it out, and the program was really in question on whether they were going to continue. In the end, public pressure or something happened where they decided they were going to pay us for the previous year. So they paid us for that previous year and this year on this year's budget. So it's really skewed on, our budget's going to be, we should have a surplus because of that.
I think the general reduction you're referring to is from the primary ASB grant, which was reduced by 27 or 29%, from 160,000 roughly to 120.
Yeah, so with that, the county had to pick up the slack. We didn't reduce any of our programs. Continue to do all of what we said we were going to do. So roadside mowing, this is the biggest function we do. There's this is combined with roadsides, hamlets. There's a number of mowing that falls into that amount, and this is part of our. This isn't part of necessarily our grant agreement. Mowing is outside of weed control, but we use it as a integrated pest management, and a certain amount can be applied to the grant, but not a whole lot. And the value of mowing can be seen, of course, this year if you go down some of the roads that haven't been mowed, and just the weeds that are on them. I mean, mowing twice a year, it certainly helps in our weed control efforts. Moving down to rental equipment.
Just one on the mowing thing, actually. One of the reasons too that we do the mowings is for safety, of course, that people can see things, right? Like especially by intersections and this and that. Have you noticed that that we did it less this year? That there were more, the weeds were, that there were weeds or grass was that high that it could be implement and not to be dangerous and not that we didn't have it the same as other years?
No, we've had, at our level, we've had the same, but just that the province's provincial highways. I'm not sure of any data for collisions on that, but if you drive down our roads before they're mowed, you're driving down a highway, you can really see the traffic coming off onto the highway aprons, which is a big safety factor. I think it really, really helps for safety at intersections when our gravel roads are mowed right up to the apron. You can see the traffic coming, like it's elevated almost. Some of that grass is 4 feet high, and how high is a car, right? So, no, it's
because I did have some inquiries of that from the ratepayers, yeah. So
regarding transportation or ours.
yeah, transportation and
Yeah.
that and the county roads, the same thing. That because it was a little bit later this year, I assume. That
No.
you started, or it just depends where you
No.
started, of course, right?
So with that program, we move it around on the start, depending on where our spray area is for that year. So our spray area being out in divisions 4, 5, and 6, we stayed out of that Park Lake area. That was part of our spray area. That's why it was a little bit later. People get used to our general program and where we roll through. Usually we start in one area and we roll right across the irrigated area, including Park Lake. So we had to leave that area for our spray trucks to control the weeds. And what worked out really well is we sprayed it all before, and then after it was mowed, that area in the Park Lake in that area is some of the cleanest ditches that are in the county this year. So our program's working on how we do it. So, and then moving on to rental equipment. So the rental rates are set out in our schedule of fees, and then we will provide a list of the equipment, and this will change somewhat. Some of the equipment, if we're not getting a lot of use, we'll sell it, and maybe we're adding more as well. So that's in the schedule of fees bylaws. Moving on to parks, cemeteries, hamlets, and subdivision. There's just a couple policies involved in there, and then we have our level of service. We like to get around our parks depending on the time of year, 10 to 14 days cycle times. Sometimes it's quicker if it's raining in June, and then sometimes we get into July or August, and you might do it once every 2 weeks, and then right now, grass is really slowed, so. We also have a certified playground inspector. We go and inspect things monthly, as well as the trail systems that are inspected, and we enhance and replace some of the equipment at the playgrounds. Cemeteries, it's the same as you've seen in my report, twice a year. As you can see from my report earlier, the correlation to actually what we're doing, and this is the reason. We always had a set standard level of service. Maybe you guys just didn't see it, didn't see the whole picture here. So now we're bringing that all together. So brushing, tree removal, pruning, this is something the Ag Service Board is just is part of what we do now. So we go around in the winter and we only remove any trees if they're a hazard, if they've blown down in the summer months. All pruning and brushing, that's done during winter months, and it allows us to keep our staff on a little bit longer and keep them busy as well. And then number 11 is just what could cause delays in maintenance. Well, weather is the biggest thing. I mean, when you're spraying and it blows every day, this year was the slowest start to the spray season we ever had. Not a lot we can do about that. We got to follow the rules. Equipment breakdowns, we're pretty good there. We're running always optimal equipment. Intense farm activity, when there's a silage haul, potato haul coming up, mowers are moved around to avoid those areas as well. Well as emergency of the municipality or manpower shortage. COVID's brought these issues to light, or pandemic. So just to conclude what we talked about, our level of service, that's a balance between the legislative responsibilities that we set out in our grant and what the public wants, and then of course council has to consider that and give the proper budgetary amounts. So, and I report on all of our activities to government every year and what we do, and we have to meet those. We want to meet those requirements, so we keep our budgeted amount for both streams of funding. So if you move down, and finally is the appendixes. All this is all of our policies formed into one, and you just follow them through. They're a little bit different format, and we think the format works well, that each year this can be brought in front of council as one entire piece for the Ag Service Board and the level of services, and then if anything needs to be changed, it's all front and center. And I mean, like you say, often you get public feedback on the services they want, and then that's the time to bring this forward. It would be at the budget time, I would think.
So pages 12 on would basically be the policy manual then, sort of thing?
It is the policy manual, and this isn't a perfect document yet. It's our first go. So as we need to make everything smoother, that'll come. I mean, there might be a couple policies that didn't fit, and we may eliminate those policies. So this is the policies that are our main bulk of work. And you can see them here. They're just formed a little different. It's the exact wording.
And Gary, what was your plan on, working with this, and as you said, it's fluid, so would bring back in 6 months, or would you say a year, kind of give you time to work through the policies and see how effective they're being? Just a rough estimate.
I would say we could look at this winter and then bring something back in the spring Ag Service Board meeting.
Might be a good document to orient the new council as well.
Yeah, this would be good for a new council, because then they're going to have a better understanding of what we do as well. So.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a curious question. Why did you include the budget dollars in the document? Isn't that something that could change from year to year? So I just having a little trouble fitting the reason why they would be in there specifically outlined like you did.
For each of the level of service documents that we brought forward, the Public Works one including, we thought for consistency we should advertise what the budget is for each of the different tasks that we do within there. Because there is a recognition point that if the grants ever, just same thing as the one grant being potentially reduced, we still have to decide, like it's at the purview of the ASB board to essentially decide whether or not they're going to fund that shortfall or whether or not they're going to cut that budget for that level of service portion. So the budget is a good advertising tool and gives a good indication of what is our total value that we're putting into these specific activities.
So you're putting close to $1 million bucks in right now.
The total ASB budget overall is over $1 million, yes.
I understand what you're saying. I just find it kind of restrictive in a way and confusing in another way, because you're restricted to what you put in as a budget, kind of, because it's in your document. So I guess I really don't follow the reason for it to be there.
Right, but isn't that, you're saying chicken and egg. The budget sets the number and then it's reflected in this document. It's not that the budget doesn't have to follow what this document is. The budget is still the budget, right? The budget is still the parent to this, correct?
Correct. And
So every year, if that budget fluctuates, it's gonna be reflected in this document.
exactly, yep.
So I guess that's the reason I asked the question is, if you have to change this every year, is there a real value to it? Other than you're showing what you do, but it becomes more complicated, I think.
Well, the big thing with any level of service document is you're trying to set a baseline for what your services are, and it's important for council. You know, it is a secondary budget advertisement, I guess, but you are bringing that back to council. If this is what council agrees to as far as a level of service, then that's also where we have to adjust our own internal budgets and make changes within those levels of service. So I think I understand what you're going to is it is a duplication, but budgets are fluid to an extent as well. So these will change year to year to year, but that's also the intention of having this document is something that comes back before council every year. So when council sets that level of service, then we can plan accordingly.
So after budget, the spring ASB meeting would come back then, more or less, because it's the closest following the budget, I guess?
Correct, yeah. And this still has to go to council for approval as well. That's part of the recommendation within here. Now, the budget advertised within here, obviously, if it was changed or adjusted, it would need to be reflected within this document, because it will be essentially in some instances potentially almost a year behind, or sorry, not a year behind. It will be predating essentially when we bring this forward in the fall of 2022. It would be a forecast of what 2023's budget would be essentially at that point, staying consistent with the same level of services, because we do have increases. There's increases in chemical costs. Those are things we see on a trending basis, as well as, you know, we're tied to union contracts and whatnot. So there is an increase in the cost of the levels of service because of some of those smaller, or some of those implements. By any means, though, if council doesn't like seeing the budget numbers tied into this, that is good feedback, and that is something that we can remove from any of these level of service documents as well.
Well, personally, I feel it's a good thing to have that budget number down there. It gives you a bit of an indication where you're up against. If you didn't have anything down there, then loosey-goosey, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
So, does that mean that every department is gonna have to have the same process then? Because when it comes forward, is every department in the county gonna have a level of service document with their budget put in it again? Like I'm really lost as to why it has a budget component in it. I guess I'm really struggling with that point.
For me, I think it's a correlation. If you're asking for extra services, there is a cost to that. So if you're getting pressure from citizens to do extra mowing, we have this, and this is what we spend, and we can't really add because there is a cost to that till budget time. We just can't go adding services in any given year. Is what I think it's helpful for.
Policies are forward-looking documents, like all of our policies are advertised to the public, and the public has access to that. So in part of our education of the public as an overall too, when people are asking why, well, we have a level of service, here's our budget that we have allocated to that, which is approved by council, and that gives a basis for, why we can't grade the road 20 times a year, or why we can't mow 4 times a year. Here's our budget, this is our level of service that falls within that budget. That's what we can accomplish. If the public, as a general feedback portion, says we want mowing 4 times a year, then that's for us to bring, or for you to bring to us as a request to see what that cost point is, and then for you to approve accordingly what that cost increase is going to be to increase that level of service. And then change that level of service amount within this document.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're going, but it's just like being in the farming business. It's no different, because the weather drives what you have to do. Like if it's really bad weather, you may have to grade the roads twice as much as you do now. And the same with if we got enough of moisture, you may have to mow the ditches 3 times instead of twice, just for safety concerns. So that's why I guess I'm confused about the budget being part of this level of service, because if you need to increase the budget, then we need to look at that separately. So I just don't see the purpose of it being there.
Well, I think you got to see it this way, Lauren. Anyway, that the way I look at it, you cannot just increase your budget there, because all of a sudden you have bad weather, and all of a sudden you got to gravel you got to grade your road so much more often. We don't have the equipment to do that. So we're going to be, we have our line of equipment. We have like spraying and everything too. We can't do it any more than we're doing right now, because we only have so much material to do the things. And that's why I don't see anything wrong with having this number in here. I think it's just this helps you along to see what's going where. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, I like that, having that budget down there. And if it is an increase of budget needed, then that's going to be explained, and of course council has to approve that. But then at least you have a good explanation in place down there to the ratepayer down there. Hey, why did I go up? And then, well, instead of mowing twice, maybe we had to do it 4 times, and that's why. And no, I think it's a good thing to have.
I think this document becomes an easier read for the public to read too, rather than the budget. So if they are looking at level of service, they can see what each item kind of costs a little easier that way, I think.
I think it helps hold staff accountable too, so they know exactly, like in the past, we didn't really have a lot of level of service documents, and it's hard to defend our judgments and our budgets to the public if we don't have this in place. And I think this document makes it easier and holds staff accountable as well. I only have this X amount of money to do mowing, etc. So I do think it's beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I think there's obviously some different feelings on this. I think I agree with the last couple speakers. I think it adds transparency. It makes it clear to the public what we're doing and why we're doing it. It also explains why, if we raise that level of service, there's an attached budget increase that has to come with that. I think it was probably a lot of work, and I think it's great. It sheds some light on that. It's an easy to read document. It's pretty simple. Thank you. And so I would like to move the recommendation that this be moved to council for approval.
Okay, thank you, Tori. So was that something that was mentioned, it was gonna come back in a few months, or more of the shortly? To council, I mean?
We would probably look to bring this to council for probably won't make it for the September 16th meeting, but for the October, I believe it's October 2nd.
Okay, okay.
Is that right for dates? 7th, sorry,
Okay.
October 7th.
Okay. Any more questions or comments for Gary or Jeremy? Seeing none, call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried?
I would like to say how much I appreciate all the work that Gary put into all these policy documents over the years, because these are mostly all written by him, and to conglomerate all those is a large undertaking. So, well done, Gary.
Thanks.
I mean, he got it right.
Alan,
Say, yeah, Gary, he says, yeah.
You didn't hear what I said, eh, Morris? I said, don't get reckless.
thanks for joining us today, Alan. Did you have anything for us at all?
Good afternoon. I'm just here to introduce myself as your local liaison. So before this liaison program came into effect, we used to have the key conduct program, which you're all familiar with. The key conduct program, we had over 41 agronomists working with different ASBs across the province. And you all know that the extension program and the research program is no longer. And so we are reduced to a very small number of different experts that are left. And the government thought that it is very important to still maintain connection with our ASBs. So they came up with a diluted form of the key conduct program, which they refer to as the liaison, regional liaison program. So one of the two, I have got 10 counties in the south that I work with, and Joe Harrington he's got 8. So in the south region, we have 18 ASBs. So I am your liaison. I almost say key conduct, but I am your liaison. So basically, in a nutshell, what I do is maintain working relationship with Gary and inform Gary what is going on the government side, and so he can report to you as an ASB or council. And Gary is lucky that I work with the program, ASB program, so he can phone me and ask me questions that are way beyond the liaison program. So, and the way we have agreed to work, in most cases, most liaisons are doing virtually because of time limit, but because I'm local, I told Gary, if you really need me to come and see my friends here, councillors, I can come and they can ask me any question, and I can update them on what's going on the government side, on anything, including the ASB. And I'm actually impressed that Gary came up with that terms and of reference of ASB. I see a lot of progressive counties doing that, and they try to incorporate that into their strategic planning of the ASB. And so that gives the administrator, Gary, the AG Fieldman, a guiding principle how he does his work and what he wants to target on, the objectives, the targets, the measurables, and reporting. And from the reporting point of view, his report from 2020 looked pretty good, and that's what triggered the grants to come. Unfortunately, we had a reduction of 27% on the legislation side, and you guys got the most money on the resource management side. So on that note, Dale Krapko, who runs the resource management side, is eager to see you folks maintaining the same level of performance you did in the previous years. So I was just chatting with Gary here. After listening to what he said that Matt is working on looks promising, and you should maintain the communication with their Cropco, just to have that confidence, because that one is merit-based program. We look at those who are performing the best, and we give them resources accordingly. So you folks and Red Deer are on the top. Any questions?
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Where's dinner?
Eh?
Where's lunch?
I don't eat, look at me. Yeah. Yeah. So if you need me to come and update you of anything, I'm available. Yeah.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's such a monster.